Roger Severs was once just a quiet, unremarkable man, living in the shadow of his accomplished parents in the serene village of Hambleton, Leicestershire. But on November 13, 1993, that ordinary image shattered completely. At 38 years old, Roger committed a crime so brutal and calculated that it would leave his entire community stunned and horrified. During his trial at Nottingham Crown Court, a defense witness described him as an inadequate psychopath, a term that encapsulated both his emotional instability and dangerous capability. While his parents, Derek and Eileen Severs, were respected figures in their town, Derek, a successful businessman, and Eileen, a dedicated charity worker who had even received an MBA, Roger had spent his adult life unemployed, dependent on their goodwill, and bitter over their growing refusal to fund his lifestyle. On the day of the murders, Roger returned home from a drinking session, seething with resentment. The friction between him and his parents had been growing for years, rooted in their disappointment and his entitlement. That evening, Roger took a steak mallet, everyday household item, and used it to bludgeon his 69-year-old mother, Eileen, to death inside their family bungalow. It was a savage attack, one that showed no signs of hesitation or remorse. When his 68-year-old father, Derek, arrived home shortly after, Roger murdered him too, in the same manner. Both attacks were violent, bloody, and deliberate. Following the killings, Roger's actions became disturbingly methodical. He loaded the lifeless bodies of his parents into the family car and drove them to a remote section of Armley Wood, a quiet, forested area not far from the family home. There, he placed them in a natural hollow near the water's edge. Attempting to cover up the crime, he returned to the house and began removing all traces of what had occurred. Blood-stained carpets were torn up, bleach was used to clean the bathroom and garage, and a bonfire was lit in the garden, presumably to destroy other evidence. He even compiled a to-do list outlining the various cleanup tasks, including cleaning the car and putting out the fire. His intent was clear: eliminate all forensic links to the crime before suspicion could arise. Yet, despite his efforts, Roger's behavior in the days following the murders began to raise eyebrows. On November 18th, 5 days after the murders, concerned friends contacted Leicestershire police to report the couple's unexplained absence. Derek and Eileen had suddenly missed several appointments and had failed to keep social engagements. For a couple known for their punctuality and social involvement, this was highly unusual. Police were dispatched to the Severs home for a welfare check. Upon arrival, officers found a house that was noticeably out of character for the meticulous couple. The usually spotless bungalow was disorganized, with carpets missing from 2 rooms and signs of recent disturbance. These inconsistencies prompted deeper concern. Roger, however, appeared strangely unfazed by his parents' disappearance. He casually told police that his mother and father had gone on holiday, yet there was no record of any travel arrangements. Nor had they packed any belongings. Local villagers confirmed that Derek and Eileen had made several appointments for that very week, further discrediting Roger's story. With growing suspicion, police arrested Roger on November 19th on suspicion of murder. Forensic officers were brought in to conduct a thorough examination of the Severs home. In the bathroom, they found blood splatters, some partially cleaned, but still unmistakable in their presence and pattern. These splashes indicated a violent assault had taken place in that space. Traces of blood were also found in and around the garage. Investigators concluded that not 1, but 2 extremely violent attacks had occurred inside the home. The scene painted a grim picture of what had unfolded. As forensic experts continued their work, they began to find other crucial clues. Yellow fibers were scattered throughout the hallway carpets, suggesting that something heavy, likely the bodice, had been dragged across the floor. These fibers, distinctive in their appearance and texture, were found inside the Severs vehicle as well, creating a direct connection between the house and the car. What stood out further was the state of the vehicle. Known for his fastidiousness, Derek Sivers always kept the car in pristine condition. Yet now, it was covered in mud, both inside and out. This alone was a major red flag. Investigators theorized that the car had recently been driven off-road, perhaps to a remote location to dispose of the bodies. To confirm this, samples of the mud were collected from the wheel arches and footwells for analysis. The scientific breakdown of the mud proved invaluable. It contained a complex mix of quartz, calcite, ironstone, chert, and coated roadstone substances typically found on unpaved rural roads. Alongside these minerals was organic material composed of roughly 24 types of plant life, including oak, alder, hawthorn, and moss. What caught investigators' attention, however, was the presence of horse chestnut, a species not commonly found in most forests in the region. This clue narrowed the location dramatically. With the help of naturalists, police were able to pinpoint 2 potential woodland areas on or near the Hambleton Peninsula. But the final breakthrough came in the form of a small piece of fishing line found in the mud, an odd detail, yet one that hinted the bodies might be near water. Acting on this information, officers began searching one of the identified sites. It didn't take long before one officer noticed disturbed earth, soil that looked freshly moved and different in color from its surroundings. As he dug cautiously with his hands, he made contact with cold human skin. The bodies of Derek and Eileen Sivers were uncovered in a shallow grave at the base of Armley Wood. Eileen's body had been wrapped in a yellow blanket. Both victims had sustained massive head injuries, consistent with being struck repeatedly by a blunt object, likely the stake mallet used by Roger. Further forensic testing revealed that the soil covering the grave had been transported from the Severs garden. Additionally, a single potato found among the dirt was matched to those growing in Derek's vegetable patch, providing undeniable evidence of the murder's origin and cover-up. Roger's process of concealment had involved multiple trips back and forth from the house to the woods, transferring over 2.5 tons of soil and debris in an attempt to disguise the burial site. Despite his planning, he had underestimated the investigative capabilities of modern forensic science. His inability to fully clean the caress, especially the mud, proved to be his downfall. This trace evidence led police directly to the grave. Roger Sivers was formally charged with the murders of his parents on November 23, 1993. At the time, the bodies had not yet been discovered, but once the remains were recovered on December 1st, the case against him became overwhelming. During his trial the following year, he tried to plead diminished responsibility, claiming he wasn't in full control of his actions. However, the jury deliberated for just 2 hours before delivering a unanimous verdict of guilty on both counts of murder. On December 6, 1994, Roger Sivers was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the judge highlighting the brutality of the killings and the calculated efforts to hide them. The case shocked the nation, not just for the gruesome nature of the crime, but for its cold and deliberate execution. Roger had murdered the very people who had provided for him his entire life. His motive, rooted in entitlement and resentment, made the tragedy all the more chilling. Today, the murders of Derek and Eileen Sivers stand as a grim reminder of how deeply fractured family relationships can lead to the most unthinkable acts.